can I please just go back to taking on creationism? This shit just keeps happening. Why does Uganda want to release a Kill the Gays bill? Why are they doing it after they've already tried once before and failed?
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Alrighty guys, if you're new to the channel and you haven't already done so before, please make sure to subscribe, and please click the bell notification icon so that you can know when episodes come out as soon as they release. If you want to see episodes sooner, then Patreon is where you want to go. You'll receive episodes as soon as they get produced, as opposed to when they release officially on my channel. Past all that, we've got a doozy of a topic today. But before we get into it, I want to go ahead and get the fan art out of the way, since it'll be the last bit of positivity we get before we get into the topic at hand. So first we have My Emotions Right Now by Emery, some delicious pumpkin crunch from Ghost Chan, and then finally an Invader Zim inspired Raz and Suris by Jack and Quill. Thank you all for your submissions, and please strap in, this is gonna be a heavy one. So, by the end of the year, a bill is going to be introduced, or should I say reintroduced, into the Ugandan parliament. This bill, lovingly and colloquially known as the Kill the Gays bill, is set to expand the already problematic laws in Uganda against LGBTQ individuals. This isn't new. About 5 years ago, Uganda actually tried to propose a variation of this bill, and it was voted down by a technicality. But if a technicality is the only thing between your nation and committing genocide against its marginalized people, then mayhap your culture's a little bit fucked. So let's get into some of the history that Uganda has with LGBTQ rights before we get back to the present day. In 2007, a Ugandan newspaper called The Red Pepper published a list of people who were allegedly gay, many of whom suffered harassment afterwards. This is because homosexuality is already considered a criminal offense in Uganda. If you check the description, I'll be providing an old report from Amnesty International that actually has the transgression inside. In September of the same year, they published another list that had 13 women that were lesbians and therefore could be safely ostracized and harassed. In 2010, the Ugandan version of the newspaper Rolling Stone published a front-page article that listed the names, addresses, and photographs of 100 people who were considered homosexuals in a homo leak, alongside a yellow banner that read, "Hang them," flat out calling for the execution of these citizens of their nation, their fellow human beings. So from this point on, if I start to get a little heated in this episode, I'm sorry, but we're talking about people being told to be publicly executed. So if I get mad, that sucks. Human rights organizations such as, again, Amnesty International and No Peace Without Justice, and the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Trans and Intersex Association all came down hard on Uganda when this happened. As a result of these constant publications against homosexual citizens in Uganda, on January 2011, gay rights activist David Kato was murdered within the country's borders. In 2009, the Ugandan parliament had also considered an anti-homosexuality bill that, instead of just criminalizing homosexuality, would reintroduce the death penalty for it. Or, if somebody happens to be HIV positive, they would get the death penalty as well. Now, anybody that knows anything about HIV knows that you can get it from any number of things, being passed down from a parent or even getting a wrong needle. This means that while it's already hard enough to live with HIV, it would now literally be a death sentence, over and above the complications that already exist with the condition. The bill also said that Ugandans who engage in same-sex relations outside of the country borders could be extradited back to Uganda so that they could receive the appropriate punishment. Now, luckily, Anonymous actually stepped in and hacked into the Ugandan government's websites and protested the bill that way. Due to the global condemnation of this bill, the debate over the bill was actually delayed until 2014. During this time, the World Bank decided that it would postpone a $90 million loan to Uganda because of this bill and other humanitarian issues that have been happening within the country's borders. The Constitutional Court of Uganda at this time ruled that bill as invalid and didn't pass it, as I said before, due to a technicality. This is due to the fact that foreign nations would have revoked all aid to Uganda if they introduced this bill. Which brings us to today, where this bill is being brought up again. On Thursday of last week, the Ugandan government said that it plans to resurrect the original bill in order to curb a rise in what it calls unnatural sex in the East African nation. To quote the country's Ethics and Integrity Minister, Simon Lokodo, homosexuality is not natural to Ugandans, but there has been a massive recruitment by gay people in schools, and especially among youth, where they are promoting the falsehood that people are born like that. And while I went over this in my Dangers of Woo Gene Apologetics video, it's less that people are born like that and more that people can't control it regardless of whether or not they're born like that. And even so, in that video, I specifically said that the fact that somebody can't control being homosexual is not an argument against or for it. The real question is there any harm from homosexual sex? And the resounding answer to that is no. So if there's no harm to the individuals involved and to the people outside of those individuals, no matter the fuck those individuals want to do in the bed, they should be allowed to do so. To quote the minister further, their current penal law is limited. It only criminalizes the act of homosexuality. We want it made clear that anyone who is even involved in promotion and recruitment has to be criminalized. So if you're a concerned parent and you suspect that your child might be gay, the mere act of telling them that it's okay and they can be gay and that's something that's fine is enough for you to be criminalized as well. And the bill, of course, has the support of the country's president, apparently. The minister's optimistic that the bill will pass, though my hope is that if this bill does pass, that all foreign aid gets completely revoked from the fucking country. That seemed to be the only thing that stopped them from putting that bill through last time, and honestly, if you're a country that wants to slaughter your marginalized people, then you don't deserve aid. However, this time, Mr. Lakota has said that Uganda is prepared for any negative response. He says that it's a concern, but they don't like blackmailing. Much as we know that this is going to irritate our supporters in budget and governance, we can't bend our heads and bow before people who want to impose a culture which is foreign to us. Which I think gets us to the root of the problem. If your culture includes genocide, then fuck your culture. And I'm not talking about historical genocide. Every single country that exists today has been built on the backs and bodies of the dead. There is no country that has a spotless history in this way. What I'm talking about is the current and prevailing genocide. If you try to hide behind "but my culture" for any type of human rights violation, then you're not only committing a couple of fallacies, of which I'll name in a second, but you're also a scumbag human being. But onto the fallacies. The two fallacies that come to mind right now are appeal to antiquity and an attempt to pull an ought from an is. The appeal to antiquity fallacy is saying that because something was this way in the past, that way was superior and thus must continue into the future. This can also include reinforcements of previously held positions. So, because homosexuality was condemned by their culture in the past, so too must the legislation become more powerful in order to allow that to continue. The problem with committing this fallacy is that the mere fact that something existed one way in the past doesn't mean anything. It doesn't say anything about whether or not it was good, or whether it was bad. That's the first problem with appealing to a country's culture. The second problem is that it commits an ought from an is dilemma. You cannot pull an ought from an is. To take an example from United States history, because it was the fact that slavery was legal, then we ought own slaves. Now, everybody with a moral compass in my audience should be able to tell me exactly what's wrong with that sentence. It doesn't matter that something was legal at one point. That doesn't suddenly make it good, just as something being illegal doesn't automatically make it bad. Like homosexuality in Uganda. So when laws like this are introduced, a bunch of stuff ends up happening. The biggest thing is that when you introduce a bill like this, homophobic sentiments within your country end up rising and hate crimes increase. There are already hundreds of LGBT people who've been forced to leave the country of Uganda as refugees, and more will inevitably follow if this law actually gets passed. This is because in this new version of the law, merely existing as somebody who's LGBTQ is already going to be criminalized, but supporting and advocating for human rights will now be a criminal offense. And if the act of fighting for human rights is a criminal offense in your country, then I'm very comfortable in saying, fuck your country. Hell, just last week, a gay man was bludgeoned to death in Uganda, and this shit will continue if the country keeps on trying to step backwards through time. So what could be some of the reasons behind attempting to introduce a bill like this, one that is pretty much nothing but barbaric? Well, Uganda is one of the poorest nations in the world. Almost 40% of their population live on less than $1.25 a day. Women are also subjected to a lower social status than men in Ugandan culture. This means that maternal health goes down, and there's very little ability to become educated and escape reliance on abusive patriarchal figures. And before the anti-feminists in my audience start going, no, patriarchy, please, shut up, sit down, nobody cares. There are countries that have obvious patriarchal structures. This is one of them. Failure to recognize that is a personal failure on your part, not mine. So, what could be the possible reason behind this? Why are women stepped on and anybody who's LGBTQ stepped on to the point of being told that their existence is a criminal act? Well, according to a 2014 census, around the time the bill was taken down the first time, Uganda is 85% Christian and 14% Muslim. Roman Catholics specifically make up 40% of the population, with Anglicans making up 32%, and other Protestant or evangelicals making up the rest. You would think that with me bringing up that I'm gonna go ahead and say that Christianity and Islam are the reasons for the country's homophobia. And that might be partially true, but a little look into Uganda's history shows that it's actually colonialization. Throughout the country's history, there was actually an older acceptance for homosexuality. There were ethnic groups such as the Ugandas who actually did engage in homosexual acts. Hell, under the Lango people, they even had a third gender recognized. This third gender was called Mudoko Deko, and phenotypically it consisted of incredibly effeminate men who were able to marry other men without any social sanctions. Homosexuality was also acknowledged among the Teso, Bahami, Benyoro, and the Karamojong people. So, what happened? Well, when the British arrived in Uganda in the 19th century, the Ugandan Protectorate was established. The country that was once incredibly hostile to Christians and any missionaries, which can be seen through the actions of King Mwanga II of Buganda. During his reign, he regarded all Christian missionaries and anyone with colonial powers as threats. While many Western nations have since progressed and dropped a lot of their human rights violations where LGBTQ people are concerned, Uganda was colonialized during a time where this wasn't the case, during a time where homosexuality was seen as something that would damn you to hell. So even though the country was once very aggressive against Christians and preventing them from taking power, it seems that they were colonialized anyway, and in so doing, their culture over the last 100 years has adopted many of the more regressive principles in Christian societies. And now, the people desperately cling onto this version of their history, one that, all things considered, is incredibly young. I'll be providing an article showing some of this as well. There's going to be another one of those episodes where there's a little bit more reading involved if you want to get in on it. So what do we have here then? We have a society that historically was once accepting of its LGBTQ people back before the acronym was even thought of, and treated relationships like this with indifference, that after being colonialized, though it didn't want to be initially, is now stuck in a strange catch-22, where in attempting to hold to its Western values, the ones that were imposed on it, it is now not going to be receiving aid from Western countries. So what is my goal here? Well, my goal is to A, show a little bit of the history of what's gone on with this country, to show what situation they're in right now. They are invariably violating a bunch of human rights, and the historical reasons that they're doing so are a little abhorrent, and have shown the issues with imperialization that have reshaped cultures of other societies, sometimes for the worst. Hopefully, by getting this information out, both the current state of affairs and the history, someone with more power than me will be able to do something about this. And of course, I'm not the only person breaking the news about this, I'm just trying to do it in my own way. Most of the news outlets that I've seen covering this issue haven't gone into any of the history as to why this is the case. So hopefully you guys found some of this educational, and hopefully if there's at least one person in my audience who has some form of power over this, then you'll be able to do something. Though I recognize that that one is maybe a bit of a stretch and a dream. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please press the like button and share it with your friends. If you like what I do, please feel free to support me on Patreon, or through my merchandise store, or my affiliate down below. Just make sure to use your coupon code. And with that said, insert end of video tagline here.